Hi there. So this is going to be a different video than we normally do of me holding the camera and being outside. A neighbor of ours just the other day who's been really generous. He's a hunter. I think he's gotten 3 deer so far this year. He's been doing it his whole life. And he shot a 1-year-old buck and was offering us up the rear leg, which I was going to butcher. But then I remembered, I think it was 4 years ago, I did an experiment where I made prosciutto out of a rear leg from a roadkill deer. And it worked. It actually was this amazing thing. It was saltier than I would have loved. It was a little drier than I would have loved. But I thought I'd revisit this whole process and share it with folks. It's going to be a multi-part video. I don't want to say by any stretch that I know exactly what I'm doing. I wouldn't encourage you to do this necessarily. But we have a beautiful rear leg that's fresh. It's been very cold out, as you can see with the snow in the background. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to follow what to me has felt like the most reasonable and thoughtful instructions that we know of for pretty much all things ferment. Sandor Katz is a wonderful author. The Art of Fermentation, for all folks that are interested in food and homesteading, definitely worth your while. And in this book there's a small passage. It's on page 342. Very short little section, but he talks about curing prosciutto from a deer leg, and he talks about his specifics. So I'm going to use his recipe and I'll explain it to you as we go along. So let me take a second and do that. So the first thing that I want to do when I'm getting ready to make a prosciutto here, I say this as though I've done it 1,000 times. The second time I've done it, I go through with the knife and I trim off all the excess bits of meat, some where there's sinew or fat. If there's hair, you really kind of want a nice, clean, smooth, contiguous piece. The first thing from there is to actually weigh it, because the weight of this meat will determine how much salt I'm going to use and also what my expected weight will be. So what Sandor Katz recommends, and I think it's a reasonable place to start, is whatever the chunk of meat is that I'm trying to convert to prosciutto, I take that measurement, and so in this case I weighed this out and it is pretty darn close to 5 kilograms. I'll use metric here because it's the only thing that's actually reasonable for doing measurements. I'll take 5 kilograms, and what I want is roughly 6% of that weight in salt. And so in that case, I've made some notes in our cider logbook that we have a 11-pound or 5 kilogram piece of meat, and so I need 0.3 kilograms of salt. In this case, I'm just using unrefined sea salt, which I read in his book contains naturally trace amounts of nitrate, which will help turn to nitrite and kill the bad bacteria, botulism bacteria. And so what we're going to do is, now that this has been cleaned, trimmed, washed, and weighed, and we have that recorded, is we're going to put a little bed of salt in a clean, non-reactive tray. We don't want to use metal. So we're using plastic here. This is an old drawer from a refrigerator. And what I'm going to do is apply this salt liberally to both sides of this meat. And part of the reason why I wanted to make this video is every time I've looked up deer judo or deer prosciutto on YouTube or otherwise, I find these examples where people use what feels like 20 freaking pounds of salt. And it didn't seem reasonable to me. Like, people actually bury the whole thing in salt. And so what the idea is in this container, I'm going to salt this down, and basically wherever there's exposed surfaces, get salt on it. And I don't need to use every last drop of salt. In fact, I want to reserve some salt to add on in the next few days. And that's kind of it for the first phase of this. One video I found that I think is really reasonable is the person suggested to take a clean board. So I'll take a nice clean board from the garage that's been run through the planer, lay it on top of the meat and put a heavy weight like a rock or a dumbbell, with the idea that it'll help press the meat down and squeeze out any last blood that might be in there. The idea with the salt is over the next few days we want it to pull moisture, to pull the blood out of the meat. every few days I'll take this tray and I'll pour that off. That will be a salt and blood mix, which would be really nice to put onto the grain that we feed our chickens, so I'm not going to waste it. And what we're doing is basically adding salt wherever we see a moist spot on this meat, and every few days we're flipping it and draining it off, flipping it and draining it off.
There's a lot down here that needs it.
Oop, I better get in there. Thank you.
Well, you're still missing a bunch.
Thank you. Just kidding. Thank you, Sasha. So, yeah, right, there's a whole bunch in there. So, and that's part of the reason why overall, I would want to have 6% of the weight of this meat in contact with the meat during this initial dry down time. And so I'm going to hold on to this and I'm going to reuse what's in the tray since we cleaned this thoroughly. We're going to do this for...
Wait, sorry, but there's another big spot. See,
oh my goodness.
It's important.
What an embarrassment.
It's important you have someone else when you're doing it to check your work.
Have someone who knows what's up. Watch what you're doing and give you feedback while you're being recorded. So we put the initial salt on, we're going to put a weight on it, and then I'll do a follow-up video in the next few days where every day or two we'll go through, drain off the blood, reapply salt, and what we're doing is we'll keep doing that for a week or two, and then we're going to start actually weighing this meat. And it's part of the reason why you want that initial weight, is not only to know how much salt to apply, but in Sandor Katz's book, you're looking for 15% reduction in weight for this piece of meat, which I didn't actually write down, but I want 15% less weight, and once it's reached that, so in other words 85% of its initial weight, so I'll keep weighing it. As soon as it's reached that, we're going to wash the salt off, we're going to apply lard and spices, wrap it in cheesecloth, and then we'll hang it in the basement to cure. But we'll make more videos as we go along. I just thought I would share this process, whether it works or not. So this is where we're starting. Thank you for watching, and check back for further videos as we make them.